The weathered Victorian house stood on the edge of a small town, its towering spires and intricate woodwork casting long shadows in the fading afternoon light. The Johnson family, a father, mother, and their 3 children, stood at the foot of the gravel driveway, staring up at their new home with a mix of awe and unease. "This place is huge," Sam said, the eldest at 16, muttered as he adjusted his glasses. "It looks like it belongs in a horror movie." Beside him, the 14-year-old sister Claire shivered. "I kind of love it. It's creepy, but it has character." Their youngest brother Max, only 9, ran ahead with a burst of energy, excited to explore. "This place is awesome. I bet there are secret rooms with hidden passages," he shouted over his shoulder. Their parents, Susan and Peter, exchanged amused glances. "Well, it might be a bit of work, but they'll be home soon enough," Peter said, swinging his arm around his wife's shoulders. The house had been a rare find, a spacious old mansion untouched for years, left to decay after the death of its last owner, a reclusive man named Mr. Hargrave. The price had been surprisingly low, and despite its age, the house still had a solid foundation. It was perfect for the family looking to escape the bustle of city life, or so they thought. As they began moving in, the house was eerily quiet. Creaks in the floorboards echoed through the vast hallways, and the wind whistled through the cracked windows. Still, the family worked late into the evening, setting up beds, unpacking boxes, and claiming rooms. By nightfall, everything was peaceful, at least on the surface. The parents retired early, exhausted from the day, leaving the children to explore the house a bit more before bed. Sam, Claire, and Max roamed the dimly lit corridors, fascinated by the history lurking in every corner. But even as they laughed and joked, a strange tension seemed to hang in the air. Every now and then, Sam would catch a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye, or Claire would hear a faint whisper she couldn't quite place. Max, being younger, was oblivious to the unease slowly growing around his siblings. "Let's explore more tomorrow," Sam suggested, glancing at the darkened staircase leading up to the upper floors. "It's getting late and we got all the time in the world." Claire nodded, but as they headed to bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as the Johnson family continued to settle into their new home. They repainted rooms, fixed leaking pipes, and made the house their own. The parents, busy with remodeling, often left the kids to their own devices, but by the 3rd night, things began to change. It started with a small, almost unnoticeable occurrence. A door would creak open with no one nearby, or the sound of footsteps would echo down the hall when the children were alone upstairs. Max was the first to notice. "Did you hear that?" he asked Sam one night as they sat in their shared bedroom, the light from a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls. "Hear what?" Sam asked, looking up from his book. "That thump," Max said, his eyes wide. It came from the hallway. Sam listened for a moment but heard nothing. "It's probably just the old house settling," he said, though he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been growing since they'd moved in. Later that same night, Claire had her own experience. She was in the kitchen getting a glass of water when she saw something out of the corner of her eye, a flicker of movement like a shadow darting across the room. She spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. The next morning, the kids compared stories over breakfast, their voices low so their parents wouldn't overhear. "I swear I saw something last night," Claire whispered. "It wasn't just a shadow. It moved like it was watching me." Max nodded vigorously. "And I keep hearing those footsteps in the hallway. It's not just the house creaking. Someone's walking around." Sam, ever the skeptic, tried to stay rational. "It's an old house. Old houses make noise and shadows play tricks on your mind. We're all just getting used to it." But Claire wasn't convinced. "Maybe, but I think there's more going on here." Over the next few days, the strange occurrences became harder to dismiss. Objects would move when no one was looking, a book left on a table when there was no one around, or a door that had been shut would swing open without a sound. At first, it was small things, but soon the activity escalated. One night, Max's toys were found scattered across the living room, despite the fact that he'd been in his bed for hours. Claire's bedroom window would rattle violently, even when the air outside was still. The tension in the house grew palpable, and then, one afternoon, while exploring the upper floors, they found the hidden door. The discovery of the hidden attic came unexpectedly. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Sam, Claire, and Max had decided to explore the upper floors while their parents were out shopping for supplies. They had wandered through dusty corridors and peered into empty, forgotten rooms, but it wasn't until Claire accidentally leaned against an old bookshelf that they uncovered the hidden door. The bookshelf, much to her surprise, swung away from the wall, revealing a narrow staircase that led upward into darkness. "Whoa," Max whispered, his eyes wide with excitement. "It's a secret room. I told you this place had hidden stuff." Sam frowned, looking warily up the stairs. I don't know, maybe we shouldn't. But Claire, always the braver of the three, had already started up the stairs. Come on, she said, calling over her shoulder. It's probably just more dusty old rooms. What's the worst that could happen? Sam reluctantly followed, with Max close behind, practically bouncing with excitement. The stairs creaked under their weight, and the air grew colder with the higher they climbed. When they reached the top, they found themselves in a small, cramped attic space that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust coated everything: old furniture, broken picture frames, and stacks of yellow paper. But the centerpiece of the room was an antique desk, its surface littered with forgotten items. Claire was the first to approach the desk. She gently wiped away the layer of dust, revealing an old leather-bound journal. She opened it, her curiosity piqued. It's a journal, she said, flipping through the pages. Looks like it belonged to the previous owner, Mr. Hargrave. Sam came closer, peering over her shoulder. What does it say? Claire began reading out loud, her voice growing more serious with each word. The journal entry started innocently enough, Hargrave writing about his quiet life in the old house, the repairs he had done, and the peaceful solitude he had enjoyed. But as the entries went on, they grew darker. He was a medium, Claire read, her voice barely above a whisper. He moved here after the original owners were murdered, apparently during a seance. They summoned something they couldn't control. Sam's heart raced as Claire continued reading. According to the journal, the original owners, an adventurous couple, had dabbled in the occult. They had attempted to communicate with spirits in the house, and in doing so, unleashed something malevolent. Mr. Hargrave had bought the house years later after their deaths in an attempt to stop the haunting, but he hadn't finished his work before his untimely death. As Claire closed the journal, the weight of their discovery pressed down on them. The strange occurrences, the eerie noises, it all began to make sense. The house wasn't just old and creaky, it was haunted, and whatever had been unleashed decades ago was still here. After their discovery, the atmosphere in the house grew even more tense. The children debated whether to tell their parents about the journal and the attic, but something in the air made them hesitate. Susan and Peter had been acting strange subtly at first, but it was just growing more pronounced with each passing day. It started with little things. Their parents would stare off into space for long periods, their expressions vacant and distant. They would forget simple things, where they had put their keys, what they had eaten the night before, and then there were the whispered conversations late at night, when the children could hear their parents talking in low, urgent voices through the walls. One evening, Sam found his mother standing at the kitchen sink, staring out at the window into the dark backyard. She didn't seem to notice him as he entered the room. "Mom?" he asked cautiously. Susan didn't respond. Her eyes were glassy, her face pale. It wasn't until Sam gently touched her arm that she blinked and looked at him, her expression suddenly sharp and alarmed. "Oh, Sam, I didn't hear you come in," she said, her voice too cheerful, too forced. Sam frowned. "Are you okay?" "Of course I am," she said quickly, but there was something off about the way she said it. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, the children huddled in Sam's room, discussing their parents' increasingly strange behavior. "They're not acting like themselves," Claire said, her voice low. "It's like they're being controlled by something." Max, sitting cross-legged on the bed, looked between the siblings with wide eyes. "Do you think it's the ghost?" Sam nodded grimly. "It has to be. The journal said the spirit can possess people. It must have gotten to them." The realization sent a shiver through all of them. Their parents, once so warm and attentive, were changing, and the longer they stayed in the house, the more they seemed to drift away, as though the malevolent presence was slowly consuming them. "We have to do something," Claire said, determination hardening in her voice. "We have to finish what Mr. Hargrave started. We have to get rid of the spirit before it's too late." Sam agreed, though the thought of confronting the entity that had haunted the house for decades filled him with dread. "We'll use the journal. There has to be something in there, something to help us end this." But as the night wore on and their parents' voices echoed hauntingly from the floor below, the children realized they were running out of time. With the journal in hand, Sam, Claire, and Max gathered in the attic late one night, determined to find a way to banish the spirit that had taken hold of their home. The old leather-bound book felt heavier in Sam's hands than it should have, as if the knowledge within carried the weight of decades of fear and tragedy. Claire flipped through the brittle pages, searching for anything that might help. "Here," she said, pointing to a passage near the back of the journal. "It says Mr. Hargrave was working on a ritual, an exorcism. He believed it was the only way to free the house from the spirit." Sam leaned over, reading the intricate details of the ritual. It involved symbols, incantations, and the use of specific items, some of which were still in the attic, covered in dust and forgotten in time. But the final instruction chilled them all. "The medium must serve as a conduit for the exorcism," Claire read out loud. "Hargrave. He was the one who had to perform it. He was the only one who could. But he's dead, Max said, his voice trembling. How are we supposed to do it now? Sam's mind raced. They didn't have a medium, and their parents, who might have been able to help, were already under the spirit's control. The children were alone in this, but there had to be another way. Maybe, Sam began slowly, maybe we don't need a medium. Maybe we can finish what Hargreaves started. Claire looked at him uncertain. How? We don't know anything about spirits or exorcisms. We know enough, Sam said, his voice gaining confidence. The journal says the spirit feeds on fear and confusion. It's already got into Mom and Dad, but if we do this ritual right, if we focus and don't let it scare us, we can stop it. Max, still clearly scared, nodded bravely. We have to try. That night, they gathered the items listed in the journal, candles, a mirror, a bell, and the symbols that Hargreaves had meticulously drawn in the margins. They arranged everything in the attic, just as the ritual instructed, and prepared to begin. But as the candles flickered and the shadows deepened, the air around them grew colder. The air itself, the house itself, seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for what was to come. Sam began to chant the incantations, his voice steady, despite the fear tightening in his chest. Claire and Max stood beside them, their hands gripping each other as they watched the darkness shift and move around them. And then, with a sudden, violent gust of wind, the spirit made itself known. The attic erupted into chaos as the malevolent spirit manifested itself in the flickering candlelight. The temperature plummeted, and the shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and wreathing as if eager to consume the children where they stood. The very walls of the house groaned as though the spirit's presence was too much for the old structure to bear. Max cried out as the air grew thick with an oppressive energy, but Claire squeezed his hand, trying to keep him calm. "Stay focused," she whispered, though her own voice trembled with fear. Sam continued the incantation, his voice growing louder as the spirit's presence intensified. The shadows around them coalesced into a single form, a dark, formless mass that hovered just beyond the reach of the candle's light. Eyes, glowing red and filled with malice, materialized with the darkness, and a low, guttural growl filled the air. "You cannot stop me," a voice hissed, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "This house belongs to me. Your parents belong to me." The spirit surged forward, and for a moment Sam faltered, the words of the ritual slipping from his mind as terror took hold. But Claire stepped forward, her eyes fierce with determination. "You won't have them," she shouted, her voice breaking through the spirit's dark influence. "We won't let you." With renewed strength, Sam resumed the incantation and Claire joined him, her voice steady and defiant. Together their voices filled the attic, drowning out the spirit's hateful whispers. The candles flared brighter, and the symbols they had drawn on the floor began to glow with an otherworldly light. The spirit recoiled, its form flickering and distorting as the power of the ritual took hold. But the struggle was far from over. The spirit lashed out, knocking over furniture and sending papers flying through the air. The walls trembled and the floorboards groaned under the force of its rage. Max, his face pale with fear, grabbed the bell and rang it as the journal instructed. The sound echoed through the attic, cutting through the chaos like a blade. The spirit shrieked, its form twisting and wreathing as if in agony. "No," he howled. "You cannot banish me. I was here long before you." Sam, Claire, and Max stood their ground, their voices rising in unison as they completed the final incantation. The light from the candles intensified, filling the attic with a blinding glow, and then, with one last ear-piercing scream, the spirit was gone. The darkness lifted, and the air grew still. The candles flickered weakly before going out, leaving the children standing in the quiet aftermath of the exorcism. They were shaken, exhausted, but alive. "Is it over?" Max asked, his voice small and uncertain. Sam nodded, though he could hardly believe it himself. "Yeah," he said softly, "it's over." But as they made their way back downstairs, the parents waiting for them, dazed and confused, the children knew that the house would never be the same. They had confronted the darkness within its walls, and though they had won, the memory of what had happened would linger. The spirit had been vanquished, but the house, their home, would forever be marked by the events of that night.